All right, what we want to talk about, or the issue that we want to at least consider and think upon today, is this whole aspect of morality, which obviously can be contentious in a public setting, whether it be a university, whether it be a political situation, whatever the case may be. Culture at large is going to be very contentious, very tight, lots of tension surrounding the question of morality, especially in regard to, or as it pertains to each individual in relation to other individuals. What is right and wrong? Now, the point that we want to consider, from the angle that we want to come from, is let's begin to look at the question strictly from the sense of the evolutionary perspective of morality. Now, it's important to note that we're not necessarily arguing against evolution. I think that evolution is I think it's a non sequitur, that nothing follows from the fact of evolution being true or not in regards to the claims of Christianity. But let's look at evolution in the atheistic sense of the term as that pertains directly to morality. So imagine that you and I are in a cafeteria or wherever we may be, and you have the position, or let's say I have the position, that our morality, our sense of morality, is simply derived or given to us by our evolutionary models, our evolutionary trappings that have been given onto us. So for instance, social contract. I don't do this to you, you don't do that to me. That enables the species to survive longer. I don't run around acting like an idiot. You don't run around acting like an idiot. That allows the species to survive longer. It's more productive for the promotion of the species. Now, some would say, and that's an oversimplified version of the accounting of how that particular topic may provide an answer to how we have received our morality, or what we perceive to think of morality. But here's the problem, is that atheistic evolution doesn't explain morality. Atheistic evolution explains morality away. Why? Because it has been given to you by evolution simply to promote your species. Now, the problem with that may not be clear at the moment, but think about it in this context. Think about our appendix, or think about your pinky finger. Think about things that we have used, or that have been given to us by evolution for the promotion of our species. But let's suppose that they're not beneficial anymore. Let's suppose that they're actually inhibiting me from doing that which I would like to do, or possibly inhibiting my survival at the moment. Say, for instance, my appendix. Now, do I have any moral obligations to keep my appendix or my pinky finger if they get in the way of what I personally would like to do? Or if they get in the way of my survival? Or they get in the way of what my self-interests may be? Well, no, it doesn't seem that I have any moral obligation to keep my appendix if it's in the way of what I actually want to do. Now, if morality has been given to me solely, only on the basis of an atheistic version of evolution, then why ought, because the word ought implies obligation, it implies a standard of behavior that I should go towards, why ought I to keep that morality if that's just been given to me by an atheistic evolutionary model? Why should I keep that? In the same sense, why should I keep my pinky finger or my appendix if it's in the way of how I want to act? Now, some people might say, well, because if not, you would suffer the consequences of jail or social ostracism and so on and so forth. But suppose that I'm not concerned with those things. And also, it confuses the point of the consequences with what makes the action right or wrong to begin with. We're not worried about the consequences. Suppose that there are no consequences. Suppose that you can perform a behavior aside from the consequences. Say it's guaranteed that you're not going to go to jail or be socially ostracized. Let's say that you can get away with that particular behavior. Say you take money off the top of the cash register, or you do whatever. You could come up with 1,000 thought experiments of things that you may or may not do that you would never be caught and no one would know. Well, evolution, if it's concerned with keeping the species alive and keeping you specifically in production to spread your genes, well, then what does it matter? What does it matter? Now, again, let's flash over to the animal kingdom, the lower forms of the animal kingdom, that is, lower mammals, say lions, tigers, and bears. Those animals have no moral obligations to one another. They do what it takes to survive because it's what? By definition, the survival of the fittest. It's just what they do. So if one animal goes up to another animal, takes that animal's food or what have you, it's not committing some moral atrocity against the other animal. It's just doing what it's evolved to do. It's surviving. So if you and I are sitting across from one another, let's say that we're on a deserted island, to remove all these the possible social consequences out of the picture. You and I on an island, deserted, just you and I. You have a sandwich. I want a sandwich. Why ought I not smack you in the face and take your sandwich? Survival of the fittest. I get to survive. You don't. Now, of course, I think that's wrong. Hopefully, you think that's wrong. But the question is, what grounds this morality? An atheistic evolutionary account can't ground why that is wrong or not, aside from explaining why we may think that it's right or wrong, or aside from certain consequences that are not necessarily beneficial. But even when we say not necessarily beneficial, we're implying or we're invoking some standard by what we think is beneficial as opposed to what is not beneficial. So it's just hard to even get around any of the language where we're using standards and talking about standards and talking about what's bad or talking about what's worse. All right, so what we're saying is it's a hypothetical syllogism. If there are objective right and wrongs, then God would say exist. There are objective right and wrongs, therefore God would exist. Now, obviously the key premises are the key premises if they're objective right and wrongs. So that's the crux of that particular premise. Most people would say at first glance that there are none, that they don't in fact exist, that those objective principles don't exist. But of course, when we start to reflect on such notions, we don't really want to hold fast to those. For instance, if we were to say something to the effect of, recently, less than a year ago, we think of the incident that took place, the tragedy, the atrocity that took place at Sandy Hook, where an individual goes in and just wipes out multiple children, teachers, individuals. I'm going to be very blunt here, and I'm going to be very crass, but I'll do so to prove a point. If you're not willing to say that it's objectively wrong, absolutely wrong, there's no circumstance that makes it okay for a maniac to walk into a school building and just destroy children and innocent lives. If you're not willing to say that that's objectively wrong, it's absolutely wrong, something is wrong with your position, whether it be your worldview or whether it be your ideology, whatever you may be holding on to or embracing, that's not allowing you to say, yes, it's really, truly, absolutely wrong to wipe into schools and do this to children. Or, for instance, if you can't look at something, say, such as the Holocaust and say, that's absolutely wrong. It's wrong to commit genocide against people. If you can't say that, then that should be a red flag that is thrown up completely or right in the face of your particular ideology or your particular worldview that's not allowing you to embrace such a position. Now, that's not to say that there aren't confusing situations or that sometimes moral duties and obligations and so on don't conflict. Of course there are. But our purpose is just to say if there really are truly things that are truly, absolutely right or wrong, then there has to be a transcendent standard by which we're judging these notions to be right or wrong, apart from what this particular culture says is right or wrong, apart from what this particular people group says is right or wrong, apart from a political party, whichever one, whoever, it doesn't matter, wants to say that's right or wrong. So that if someone were somehow able to convince and brainwash the entire population that the Holocaust or what happened at those school systems, if someone were to convince people that, oh, that was okay, it was actually okay, then even if everybody believed that, it would still be wrong, even if everybody was somehow brainwashed into thinking otherwise. That's what we mean to say when we say that there are these objective right and wrong actions. Again, well, if someone says, well, what are they? We're not concerned necessarily right now at what they are. Do we believe that there are? That they do exist, that we can name them? Sure. But remember, we're just trying to keep this principle that if they even exist, there has to be some transcendent standard above and beyond ourselves to judge these by. One of the objections, just quickly, may be something such as the Euthyphro dilemma, which basically posits that, does God say things are good because they are good, or does God say they're good just because He wants them to be good? Obviously, the problem is if God says things are good just because He wants them to be, then they're arbitrary. He's just picking and choosing. He just the next day could pick the opposite behaviors, the opposite instances and events to be good, which, of course, obviously renders it arbitrary. Or if He's saying things are good because they are good, well, then God is having to say they're good or agree with some standard that's above God Himself. That's obviously a problem, too, for the traditional theistic position, because we would say that God is the standard. God is not under some other standard, not under some transcendent beyond that's out and over Himself. So certainly those two positions would seem to provide a problem for the traditional understanding of the theistic God. Of course, the way to split that dilemma is just to say that God is the good. So He's commanding, or He's creating natures that are in accord with His very nature. And also, that makes it obviously not arbitrary, because He can't go against what His nature is. And it's not above Him, because it is His nature. Now, again, the Euthyphro dilemma can also be flipped, because we can look at it in the sense of men. The men say that things are good because they are good, or the men call things good, and is that the criteria which makes them good? So it's a double-edged sword. If somebody wants to use the Euthyphro dilemma against God, but then try to say that there's actual standards of right and wrong that don't need God, well, the Euthyphro dilemma obviously still posits the same problem for men in general. We'll show you some introductory material and some in-depth material that can help you go further into this particular argument, or at least discussion as we're framing it, to show that there really are standards of right and wrong. And at the end of the day, when we pull some of these hard examples, that those aren't necessarily so problematic when we look at easy examples of things that all people everywhere should agree that are absolutely wrong or absolutely right.